Welcome back to Switchstars everyone, and to another indie game review. My name's Luke, and today on the channel we're going to be taking a look at Post Void, a surreal FPS game which looks absolutely insane, and one which I had on my radar for quite some time now, and after several delays has finally been released on the Switch. But prepare yourselves, cause this one is pretty intense. So drop a like, subscribe for more Switch reviews and content, and let's check it out. So I'm going to preface this review by issuing an epilepsy warning, as Post Void features a pretty extreme visual style with ridiculous amounts of flashing imagery. So if you're prone to photosensitive epilepsy or just don't like your eyes being overloaded with lights and colour, then I suggest you stop watching now. With that said and out of the way though, the storyline in Post Void is about as obscure and as insane as the rest of it, and after a short little introductory section which runs us through its control scheme, we're treated to a nice little cutscene which lays down the plot for us. Now from what I can gather, basically before everything else there was the Void, a peaceful tranquility of nothingness, free from sight and sound, but then came the headache of noise and colour. We play as a random gun-toting dude who is attempting to get back to the Void to not only end his headache and return to its serenity of darkness, but also to help it flourish and once more bring peace to the world. And so carrying his head in his hand, he must fight his way through the ceaseless noise and violence over and over until he finally succeeds. That in a nutshell is it though. Like I said, it's incredibly obscure and doesn't give us much to go off, but it serves its purpose and works well enough as an introduction. Now I'll start by saying that I'm not going to be giving a rating for Post Void in this review, simply due to the fact that I haven't yet got good enough to actually beat the game, but I will be giving you an overview of its gameplay and mechanics, as well as sharing my own personal opinions, so hopefully this should give you enough of an idea of what to expect from it. Now, gameplay wise, you can kind of think of Post Void as being the love child of Wolfenstein 3D and Hotline Miami, having the simplistic FPS mechanics of the former and the difficulty level of the latter, minus the one-hit deaths, but it's all about blazing your way through the levels as fast as possible, mowing down enemies to keep yourself alive, and making it to the checkpoints to give yourself a breather before doing it all over again. And let me tell you now, this is one which requires sharp accuracy, lightning fast reflexes, and a little bit of luck for good measure. To start with though, the control scheme is extremely simple, consisting of your basic FPS movement with the thumbsticks controlling your turning and walking, your right trigger shooting with the Y button used to reload, and the left trigger performing a slide manoeuvre which to some extent can be used to dodge incoming enemy fire. The skull in your hand acts not only as your life pool, but also a countdown timer, with its liquid slowly seeping out of it, and taking damage will drain this liquid further, and in order to keep it topped up, you need to continually take down enemies to steal the life force. But this proves to be much harder than it sounds, and like the aforementioned Hotline Miami, if you're not careful, runs can be over within a matter of seconds. It's a vicious cycle of try, die, try again, die again, and repeat until, unlike me, you finally manage to succeed. And it turns out to be incredibly addictive gameplay loop which rewards skillful play and punishes anything but. To keep the variety up though, the game features some roguelike mechanics, which not only means the layouts and enemy placements in levels are completely randomised, but also that after completing a level you're presented with a random selection of weapons and perks to choose from, and from what I've seen the pool of these does appear to be pretty small. Now your weapon options are limited to a hard-hitting shotgun, rapid-firing Uzi, or a knife which requires you to get in close for some brutal melee kills, while the perks include things like faster reload times and larger clips, ricocheting bullets, exploding enemies, and more health from killing enemies, and in my opinion the shotgun with faster reloads is definitely the one to go for the biggest helping hand. There are however a couple of perks which I felt were pretty weak, like faster movement whilst walking backwards or a compass which points you towards the exit, and in all honesty I felt that they were a little limited and didn't really help out too much with making runs easier, with it really being more down to the player's skill rather than RNG with the upgrades, but they do add enough variety to runs to ensure they don't become overly repetitive. Like I said though, the premise is pretty straightforward. Work your way through 11 levels, avoid taking damage, take down enemies to keep your life topped up, and hope to RNGesus that you don't get a bad layout. The gameplay is hectic as hell though, as you race through maze-like levels at a breakneck speed, attempting to save as much time as possible by hitting those headshots and avoiding taking unintentional damage and wrong turns, and the complexity and challenge only ramps up the further you progress, as only a few levels deep and layouts start to become less linear, having you jump up and down platforms, blast your way through fleshy doors and dodge deadly traps. But I think that this will really be the sticking point for most people with Post Void. It's difficulty. There were many occasions when I got on a good run only to take a wrong turn, miss a few shots or take a couple of hits in quick succession and wound up dead, and I feel this may prove to be a little too frustrating for some people, as there are no difficulty settings in the game, so the accessibility of it is pretty limited, and it's definitely one of those which requires you to play it over and over to hone your accuracy, learn its tricks, and really embrace the hypnotic chaos of its flow. I do however think that there are opportunities to tone down the difficulty just a little, especially in the early game. The ranged enemies, for instance, fire up on you almost immediately, and given that there's very little room to manoeuvre in its tight corridors, more often than not you'll take a hit, with a couple of them resulting in a game over. And I suspect that the slide manoeuvre is intended to allow you to slip beneath enemy bullets, but your timing has to be pretty much perfect for it to actually work, and I don't believe it offers any iframes, which would have made it much more effective. Enemies also come in different shapes and sizes, which adds some nice variety to gameplay, but also means that sometimes you'll have to aim down at them, and they also have a habit of dodging out of the way, which, coupled with the weapon recoil and some pretty intense muzzle flashes and other visual effects, really makes them a challenge to target sometimes. Finally, unlike other roguelikes or roguelites where your perks apply incremental power gains, like I said, the perks in Post Void really don't feel like they do much for you, and I think that a health boost or possibly a rechargeable shield to soak up a few more hits would really help to balance things out a little. Now, after playing the game for several hours and only ever managing to get to around the 6th level, I feel like the objective in Post Void isn't so much to kill every enemy that you encounter and more be selective about which ones you do, avoiding unnecessary encounters whilst also keeping your skull topped up to avoid running out of time. And I feel like this is what sets Post Void apart from other first-person shooters. The game itself feels like a speedrun and its skill floor is set reasonably high right from the get-go, but once you get into the swing of things, the action feels great, especially when you manage to chain together multiple headshots and escape unscathed, but it's as demanding as it is addictive, and it's going to take plenty of one more tries until you come even close to completing a full 11 level run through. Overall though, a fantastic little FPS roguelike which assaults the senses and demands your full attention 100% of the time. So visually then, again I'll go back to the Hotline Miami Wolfenstein comparison, as it has those rudimentary Wolfenstein 3D graphics laced with the acid trip vibrancy of Hotline Miami, and a lick of Lovecraft for good measure, with its enemies having plenty of tentacles and teeth to deal with. And while I admit that given the breakneck pace of the game you'll barely have time to notice them, I for one absolutely love the visuals in this one, but I definitely feel like they're on the extreme end of the spectrum, and all of that flashing might prove a little too much for some players, though it should be noted that you can tone this down in the options menu. From what I experienced though, the overall performance on the Switch is great, which definitely is a good thing considering the pace of the gameplay. And when it comes to the audio, it's a barrage of thrash metal, punchy weapons and monstrous screams. Overall pretty simple stuff, but much like the visuals it all sounds fantastic and fits the gameplay perfectly. But if you can handle them, top class stuff on the audio and visual front. So all in all then, given its extreme visual aesthetics and high skill cap, Post Void is most certainly not going to be for everyone, and progression is gained in inches not feet with this one, and it requires plenty of grit and determination even to make it through the first couple of stages. But once you get into the flow of things, it becomes incredibly satisfying, and it really is just so easy to jump in for one more run despite failing 15 of them in the past 10 minutes. Its simplicity is also its highlight, giving you the tools you need to master right from the get-go and leaving it down to you the player to hone your skills with them. And while it is potentially a very short game with each of its levels taking less than a minute to run through, successfully surviving and completing a full run will likely take you several hours. Your reward, if you're lucky, being a spot on the online leaderboards. Overall though, a great time filler at worst, an addictive hour drainer at best, but all round a furiously fast FPS game, and in my opinion, one of the best in genre on the Switch. With that said though, do you reckon that you have what it takes to handle some post-void madness, or will you be sitting this one out? Let me know down in the comments section below, and as always, do me the honours of dropping a like if this review helped you out, and if you enjoy my content, consider subscribing to the channel. For now though, I just want to thank you all once again for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves and game on.